Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Some people intimidate without lifting a finger, and the world quietly obeys their gravity. It's a strange phenomenon. A man can walk into a room, barely speak, and somehow make everyone feel slightly off balance. Psychology calls it non-verbal dominance, a subtle force that registers in the subconscious before words even matter. Studies show that humans react instinctively to presence, energy, and confidence, even if it's silent. And Sigma males? They've perfected it without even trying. They don't need loud declarations or dramatic gestures. Their intimidation isn't manufactured. It's organic, unavoidable, and often unnoticed by themselves. People around them stumble over their own insecurities, reveal their weaknesses, or panic over nothing at all. It's like watching a storm form silently on the horizon. Only the storm is a man who hasn't even realized he's causing it. And here's the kicker. He can do all of this while sipping coffee and scrolling his phone, utterly indifferent to the chaos quietly radiating around him. That's the world of a Sigma male, magnetic, unsettling, and dangerously underestimated. Number 1. He's hard to impress, not because he's arrogant, but because he's observing depth. A Sigma male isn't impressed by flashy displays, hollow compliments, or superficial achievements. He doesn't nod along to social expectations or give praise just to be polite. That doesn't make him arrogant. It makes him incredibly discerning. He's constantly observing, analyzing, and measuring depth. Every word, action, and gesture is processed quietly, almost imperceptibly, to determine whether it has substance or is merely performance. People who rely on surface-level charm, status, or loud confidence often find themselves exposed in his presence without him ever having to say a word. The unnerving part is that he's not even trying to intimidate. He simply exists as a silent benchmark for authenticity, and by that very existence, he forces others to confront the shallowness of their own behavior. This intensity creates a pressure that few can handle. When someone realizes they are being truly seen, not superficially noticed, it's disarming. The Sigma doesn't hand out praise or validation freely, which makes those around him hyper-aware of their own shortcomings. It's not just that he doesn't clap at mediocrity. It's that his lack of reaction makes people question everything they thought was impressive. He doesn't have to voice judgment because his energy communicates it with surgical precision. That silence is louder than any critique. At the same time, this makes him magnetic to those who have real depth because they recognize a rare peer, someone who doesn't tolerate pretense. But for those who lean on ego, vanity, or shallow confidence to get by, the experience is subtly terrifying. They feel exposed, inadequate, and unsure of how to navigate his presence. And the Sigma male likely never even notices the effect he's having. His focus remains on truth, substance, and real connection rather than approval or dominance. That combination, perceptive, indifferent, and quietly exacting, makes him one of the most intimidating personalities without him ever needing to raise his voice. Number 2. He presence disrupts fake confidence in others. A Sigma male doesn't try to overpower anyone, yet the very air around him exposes pretense. People who rely on loud voices, forced charisma, or carefully constructed social facades suddenly feel fragile in his presence. It's not intentional. He's not actively trying to make anyone uncomfortable. He simply exists with a quiet authenticity that highlights the artificiality in others. The energy he radiates makes those who are performative painfully aware of the cracks in their own act. People unconsciously compare themselves to him, and the comparison is brutal because he isn't performing. There's no effort to impress, no need to dominate conversations, no dependence on validation. His calm, unshakable presence automatically elevates his credibility, while simultaneously undermining anyone relying on superficial confidence. That contrast creates an invisible pressure that others feel in their chest. They start second-guessing their words, their gestures, even their presence. They feel raw because he doesn't hand out reassurance or compliments. They can't lean on him to validate their importance. This effect is magnified in group settings, where people depend on collective energy to feel secure. The Sigma male doesn't conform to group dynamics. He doesn't play social games, and he doesn't inflate egos to make himself accepted. That makes those around him hyper-aware of their own insecurities and the artificiality of their social performance. They begin to stumble, overcompensate, or freeze, not because he is loud or threatening, but because he doesn't play the same game and refuses to participate in their illusions. At the same time, this disruption is subtle and almost invisible. Most people never even realize why they feel uneasy. They just know that being around him feels different. It's a quiet, unspoken accountability for authenticity. In this way, his presence is both magnetic and intimidating. People are drawn to the raw honesty of his energy, but simultaneously terrified because it exposes their weaknesses without the masking. That tension, subtle yet powerful, is one of the reasons Sigma males can dominate a room without speaking, commanding respect through presence alone. Number 3, he walks away without announcing it, and that power terrifies people. A Sigma male doesn't beg for attention, cling to approval, or dramatize his exits. When he decides to leave a situation, a conversation, or even a relationship, he does it with quiet precision. There's no fanfare, no justification, no need for others to witness his decision. Yet that very detachment becomes one of the most unsettling forces around him. People don't just notice his departure. They feel it. They feel the absence, the shift in energy, the subtle reminder that he exists on a plane where their attempts to control, manipulate, or hold on to him have no power. This ability to walk away calmly exposes the dependency, insecurity, and neediness of others. People who are used to negotiating attention, extracting validation, or leveraging emotional ties suddenly realize none of it matters to him. He doesn't retaliate, he doesn't manipulate, and he certainly doesn't dramatize. He simply steps away. And because he carries no bitterness or resentment, there's no closure to chase, no apology to extract, no argument to prolong. The lack of emotional tethering amplifies the intimidation. Those left behind are forced to confront their own reliance on control and the fragility of their perceived influence. The Sigma's emotional independence acts like a mirror. It reflects how much others depend on social or emotional leverage to feel significant. This creates an invisible pressure, a quiet tension that makes people hyper-aware of their own limitations. Even the idea that he could walk away at any moment keeps people on edge, wondering how much control they really have. What makes it even more extraordinary is that he rarely even notices the effect he has. His detachment is natural, not performative, and yet it communicates a silent authority that is impossible to ignore. That balance, total freedom from emotional chains, paired with the subtle upheaval it causes in others, is one of the most powerful and overlooked forms of Sigma intimidation. People don't need him to say or do anything threatening. His ability to disengage entirely speaks volumes, and that alone makes others instinctively cautious, uncertain, and, without realizing it, deeply intimidated. Number 4, he rarely shares personal information, so people assume it's deep or dangerous. A Sigma male doesn't hand out details about his life, thoughts, or plans. He speaks when necessary, but even then, he reveals just enough to navigate reality, never enough to satisfy curiosity. This isn't secrecy for the sake of ego. It's a natural boundary, a way to preserve energy and maintain clarity. Yet for those around him, this restraint is unsettling. People instinctively try to fill the gaps with assumptions, and in doing so, they often exaggerate his depth, his capabilities, or the danger they think he represents. The mystery he maintains isn't calculated, it's inherent, but the effect is undeniable. By keeping his personal world largely private, he forces others into speculation. Every glance, every comment, every decision becomes fertile ground for projection. People start inventing stories about him, imagining skills, experiences, or knowledge he may have. They assume layers, complexity, and a life of hidden intensity. This imagined depth is often far more intimidating than reality, because the human mind fears what it cannot fully understand or predict. The Sigma's restraint also signals self-sufficiency. He doesn't need to explain, justify, or entertain. That alone unsettles people who are accustomed to emotional sharing as a form of social control. When someone tries to probe, he doesn't panic, deflect, or over-explain. He simply remains himself, calm, neutral, and unmoved. The effect is subtle but powerful. People feel exposed not by what he reveals, but by the vast unknown he carries effortlessly. This invisible pressure amplifies the perception of authority, intelligence, and danger. People sense that he could navigate challenges they cannot, make decisions they wouldn't dare, or hold knowledge they are unprepared for. And because he doesn't participate in the common social expectation of disclosure, his mere presence forces others to reckon with their assumptions, insecurities, and limitations. The quiet mastery of privacy, the refusal to perform, and the freedom from needing validation all combine to make him quietly, unnervingly intimidating, often without him ever realizing the power of his own silence. Number 5. He can end a conflict without raising his voice. A Sigma male doesn't need to shout, argue, or dominate a conversation to assert control or resolve tension. His presence alone, coupled with precise, measured action, is enough to shift the energy in a room. When a conflict arises, he addresses it with clarity and calm, often ending it before anyone fully realizes it even existed. This ability to neutralize tension quietly is profoundly disarming. People around him are left scrambling to understand what just happened, why their attempts at provocation failed, and why he never reacted the way they expected. He understands that power doesn't need to be loud to be absolute. By remaining composed, he forces others to confront the fragility of their own emotional reactions. People who are used to manipulation, dramatics, or the cycle of escalation suddenly feel exposed because their usual tactics don't work. His calm isn't passive. It's a subtle, almost imperceptible authority that asserts itself without aggression. That makes him unnervingly intimidating. People instinctively recognize that their energy, their attempts to provoke, or their loud declarations carry no weight against him. This kind of quiet dominance reshapes social dynamics instantly. Those who depend on emotional noise to feel significant or to influence outcomes are caught off guard. They realize that the conflict has ended, not because it was forced to end, but because he chose to disengage strategically and intentionally. There is no need for explanations, apologies, or posturing. That level of control, unseen yet undeniable, is disorienting for anyone who relies on drama or emotional leverage. The Sigma's approach to conflict demonstrates a rare mastery of both self and circumstance. By refusing to react unnecessarily, he projects an unspoken certainty that commands respect and creates a subtle psychological edge. His ability to resolve or disengage from tension without spectacle makes him quietly dangerous, because it highlights the futility of overreaction, exposes the weakness in others' strategies, and solidifies his own position as someone who cannot be rattled. People instinctively feel the power of his calm, and that silent authority is far more intimidating than any loud display could ever be. Number 6. He notices people's energy before their words. A Sigma male has an uncanny ability to read people without relying on what they say. He picks up on subtle cues, micro-expressions, shifts in posture, fleeting gestures, and the rhythm of someone's energy. He senses tension, insecurity, excitement, or hidden agendas before a single word is spoken. This perception isn't deliberate intimidation. It's simply how he experiences the world. Yet for those around him, it feels like he can see into their very soul. People quickly realize that they can't hide their true feelings, and that realization alone can be unnerving. He doesn't confront everyone or announce his observations. Often, he simply adjusts his behavior, his focus, or his attention in response to what he senses. That responsiveness, combined with silence or selective engagement, makes others hyper-aware of themselves. People start second-guessing their words, their intentions, and their reactions because they feel like he already knows what's going on beneath the surface. That level of awareness creates a subtle pressure that is invisible yet profoundly impactful. The intimidation doesn't come from aggression or judgment, it comes from accuracy. When someone realizes that a Sigma male has already noticed their insecurities, their small manipulations, or their hidden motives, it destabilizes them. They feel exposed, even if nothing has been said aloud. They begin to question their own strategies, their social performance, and even the authenticity of their interactions. That quiet self-examination is exhausting and humbling, and it happens without him ever raising his voice or proving a point. This perception extends beyond individual interactions. In group settings, he can sense the collective energy, detect underlying tensions, and identify the people trying to assert dominance through noise or posturing. That makes him an unpredictable and formidable presence because people know, consciously or unconsciously, that he sees more than anyone else realizes. His awareness shifts dynamics without overt effort. By noticing energy before words, the Sigma male exerts a silent, almost invisible influence over those around him. He holds a mirror up to everyone's true selves, and that mirror doesn't lie. It reveals flaws, vulnerabilities, and pretenses, making him quietly intimidating, magnetic, and impossible to underestimate. Number 7. His confidence doesn't need display, which makes it feel more real. A Sigma male's confidence isn't loud, performative, or designed to draw attention. It isn't the type that needs validation from others, applause for accomplishments, or approval to feel legitimate. It simply exists, quiet, unshakable, and fully internalized. That's what makes it so unsettling to those around him. People are accustomed to confidence that announces itself. Loud voices, flashy gestures, constant reassurance. When they encounter someone who radiates certainty without needing recognition, it forces them to confront their own reliance on external validation. This kind of quiet, self-contained confidence carries a subtle power that is almost tangible. People feel it without realizing why. It's not about intimidation in the obvious sense, it's about exposure. Others are forced to measure themselves against a standard that isn't being actively imposed, a standard they can't manipulate or negotiate. That can create discomfort, unease, or even fear, because they feel the gap between their performative confidence and the Sigma's authentic assurance. He doesn't need to prove himself, and that makes people desperate to do so. They overcompensate, stumble, or act out in ways that reveal insecurity. The more he ignores social validation, the more visible their own dependency becomes. His confidence is anchored in self-reliance and awareness, not ego or showmanship, and that subtle distinction amplifies the psychological effect he has on others. At the same time, his confidence is magnetic. People are drawn to it instinctively because they recognize its authenticity. Unlike those who broadcast their value, he doesn't force anyone to notice. It's simply there, undeniable and unshakable. That combination of authenticity, indifference, and silent authority creates a rare dynamic. People feel both drawn to him and unsettled by their own insecurities. The Sigma male's confidence doesn't scream. It whispers, yet it resonates louder than any boast or display. It exposes weaknesses without attack, commands respect without demand, and makes his presence impossible to ignore. People may not be able to articulate why they feel uneasy around him, but the truth is clear. Authentic, quiet confidence is one of the most intimidating forces there is, and the Sigma male wields it naturally, often without even realizing its power. Number 8. He makes people realize how much noise they produce. A Sigma male's presence has a strange effect on those around him. It makes people hyper-aware of how loud, scattered, or chaotic they are. He doesn't raise his voice, gesture wildly, or try to dominate attention, yet the contrast between his calm, measured demeanor and the frantic energy of others is impossible to ignore. People find themselves overcompensating, fidgeting, or speaking unnecessarily because the quiet control he exudes highlights the unnecessary noise they bring into every interaction. The subtle pressure he creates forces others to confront how performative or scattered they truly are, and that realization is quietly disarming. This isn't about intimidation in the traditional sense. He isn't trying to embarrass anyone, call anyone out, or prove dominance overtly. It's simply that by being composed, focused, and unhurried, he exposes the excess energy others rely on to feel significant or in control. That contrast makes them feel out of place, exposed, and often subtly insecure. They begin second-guessing their words, their gestures, even their social presence. It's as if his calm acts as a mirror, reflecting back everything they've been projecting or performing without realizing it. The effect is magnified in group settings, where people depend on chatter, posturing, or superficial displays to establish hierarchy. The Sigma's quiet presence destabilizes their strategies. The louder and more scattered they become, the more they reveal themselves, and the more aware they are of his steady, unshakable composure. That silent comparison can create tension, anxiety, and fascination all at once. At the same time, his ability to expose this noise is effortless. He doesn't need to speak to dismantle illusions. He simply exists in a state of calm authenticity. The subtle psychological pressure is invisible yet profound, creating an aura of quiet authority. People are drawn to him, yet simultaneously unsettled because they cannot hide behind performance. By highlighting the chaos in others without saying a word, he asserts a form of dominance that is silent, refined, and nearly impossible to resist or confront. Number 9. He doesn't try to make anyone comfortable. A Sigma male doesn't go out of his way to ease tension, smooth over emotions, or cater to the insecurities of those around him. He isn't rude or cruel, but he refuses to perform the social gymnastics most people rely on to feel safe or validated. That absence of emotional cushioning can be unsettling because people are accustomed to others bending themselves to protect feelings, manage moods, or keep the social balance intact. Around him, all of that disappears, and people are left facing reality without filters. His indifference to manufactured comfort forces others to become acutely aware of themselves. Every nervous glance, every forced smile, every tiny overreaction stands out in sharp relief. The Sigma doesn't soften criticism, explain away tension, or offer unnecessary reassurance. By simply maintaining his own composure and standards, he exposes the ways others rely on social crutches to feel secure. This exposure makes people uneasy because they realize that their usual strategies for control or influence are ineffective in his presence. This doesn't make him threatening in the conventional sense, but it does make him intimidating. People start second-guessing their words, questioning their motives, and recalculating how they interact. The lack of emotional manipulation or overbearing guidance highlights how much energy others spend performing for comfort, validation, or acceptance. They feel raw, vulnerable, and sometimes even small, simply because he doesn't participate in the usual social safety nets. At the same time, his approach is incredibly magnetic. The freedom from pretense, the refusal to pander, and the calm self-assuredness draw people toward him. They may feel discomfort, but there's also respect, admiration, and curiosity. His presence becomes a test, not of obedience, but of authenticity. People are forced to show up as themselves or risk being exposed by their own reliance on performance. By refusing to make anyone comfortable, he exerts subtle, undeniable influence. He doesn't need to control, dominate, or argue. His authenticity, composure, and refusal to participate in emotional hand-holding make him quietly formidable. People feel the weight of their own insecurities simply by being near him, and that, more than words or actions, is one of the most disarming forms of Sigma intimidation. Number 10. His focus is intense enough to make people question their importance. A Sigma male's focus is precise, unwavering, and deeply immersive. When he turns his attention to a task, an idea, or a person, it's total. He isn't distracted by the noise around him, the social games being played, or the desperate need for validation that occupies most people. That intensity, however, has an almost invisible effect on those nearby. People feel the weight of his attention, and it can make them question their own relevance. When he isn't focused on them, they feel small, invisible, unimportant. When he does focus on them, the attention feels electric, consuming, and impossible to meet with performance alone. Either way, his focus destabilizes people because they can't predict or control its direction. This isn't aggression or intentional intimidation. It's simply the consequence of someone who operates with complete immersion in his own priorities. Others are forced to confront the stark contrast between their scattered, fragmented attention and his absolute presence. People realize how much energy they waste, how often they perform for recognition, and how little they actually command the same level of awareness and engagement. That realization is quietly unsettling. The Sigma's focus also highlights hierarchy in the most subtle way. People naturally sense that his attention isn't freely given, and that it carries weight. They recognize, consciously or unconsciously, that being noticed by him is a privilege, and missing that attention can feel like a judgment, even if no words are exchanged. The dynamic shifts without him needing to assert control. He simply remains fully engaged where he chooses to be, and entirely absent where he doesn't. This level of intensity creates a paradoxical power. People are simultaneously drawn to it and unnerved by it. They crave his focus but fear the scrutiny it brings because it exposes flaws, insecurities, and pretense they might otherwise hide. That combination of magnetism and subtle destabilization makes him quietly dominant in any environment. His focus doesn't shout authority, it simply reorders perception, making others acutely aware of their own significance or lack thereof relative to him. That psychological gravity, born of pure concentration, is one of the most formidable tools in a Sigma male's arsenal. Number 11. He moves on from people without bitterness, and that emotional freedom scares them. A Sigma male doesn't linger in the past, hold grudges, or seek closure. When a relationship, friendship, or situation no longer serves him, he steps away calmly, without drama, without apology, and without looking back. That level of emotional independence is unnerving to most people because they rely on the cycles of validation, reconciliation, and emotional dependency to feel secure. Watching someone detach so effortlessly forces them to confront just how much they cling to others to maintain their sense of importance or control. His ability to move on without resentment is not about indifference, It's about mastery over his own emotional state. He doesn't need to justify his choices or punish anyone with silence. He simply prioritizes his own clarity and freedom. The quiet authority this conveys is subtle but overwhelming. People sense that they cannot manipulate, provoke, or guilt him into staying. That realization alone is intimidating because it exposes the fragility of their own reliance on emotional leverage to influence outcomes. This detachment also highlights the difference between dependence and autonomy. Most people are conditioned to expect emotional reactions, confrontations, or lingering attachments when ties are broken. A Sigma male defies all of that. He doesn't fall into the expected patterns of drama, anger, or regret. Instead, he preserves his energy, maintains his composure, and moves forward with complete self-possession. That freedom makes others feel small, desperate, or unprepared. They recognize that his value isn't tied to their approval or validation, and that can be disorienting. There's also a quiet magnetism in this behavior. People are drawn to him precisely because he isn't tethered by emotion, yet they are simultaneously intimidated by the fact that his detachment could leave them irrelevant without a word. His independence forces others to evaluate themselves, their reliance on emotional manipulation, and the illusions of control they cling to. That silent power, freedom without malice, autonomy without arrogance, is one of the most formidable forms of intimidation a Sigma male wields. Without raising his voice or issuing threats, he demonstrates a mastery of life and self that most people instinctively recognize as beyond their reach. Number 12. He holds eye contact only when it matters, and it feels like he can see everything. A Sigma male doesn't stare endlessly or make empty gestures of attention. His gaze is selective, precise, and purposeful. When he looks at someone, it isn't casual. It feels like he's scanning every thought, every intention, every hidden motive in that person's mind. It's surgical, not social. That kind of concentrated attention is rare and uncomfortable because people aren't used to being truly seen without the distraction of chatter, flattery, or performative gestures. Most try to hide, deflect, or speak to fill the silence, but he doesn't need words. His focus alone exposes their truth. This deliberate, measured eye contact is more than observation. It's a subtle form of psychological pressure. People instinctively feel that they cannot hide behind pretenses, small talk, or social armor. Every lie, insecurity, or attempt at projection is highlighted simply by the unwavering attention he chooses to give. It doesn't scream dominance, but it quietly asserts a kind of authority that is impossible to ignore. The less he engages, the more people feel their own inadequacy or superficiality under his gaze. At the same time, this ability isn't performative. He doesn't scan people to intimidate or manipulate. He simply sees what's there. That makes it terrifyingly effective. The rare moments when his gaze lingers are enough to unsettle, challenge, and command respect. People walk away aware they've been fully read, even if he never utters a single word. That balance of focus, indifference, and perception creates one of the most subtle yet powerful forms of intimidation a Sigma male naturally wields. The Sigma male isn't loud, he isn't flashy, and he doesn't crave attention. But his presence leaves an undeniable mark. He operates on a different frequency, one that exposes insecurities, highlights superficiality, and commands respect without a single overt effort. His power is subtle, quiet, and almost invisible to those who underestimate him, yet it's felt by everyone around him. People notice it in the way their own words falter, their confidence wavers, and their emotional games collapse. They sense it in his unwavering focus, his unshakable composure, and his refusal to participate in the noise that so often passes for social dominance. What makes him truly formidable isn't aggression or dominance. It's authenticity, independence, and the mastery of himself. He can destabilize a room without raising his voice, dismantle pretense without accusation, and move through life untouched by drama, while others are left scrambling to make sense of their own inadequacies. That is the silent, invisible gravity of a Sigma male. The kind of presence that forces reflection, commands attention, and reshapes social dynamics simply by existing in a way most people are unprepared to confront. To witness a Sigma male in action is to witness a paradox: magnetic yet unsettling, calm yet deeply powerful, free yet quietly exacting. And the most remarkable part? He usually doesn't even realize the effect he has. His strength is natural, effortless, and authentic, and that is what makes him quietly terrifying to anyone trying to play games, manipulate, or assert false dominance. If you've been captivated by the subtle power of the Sigma male, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights that reveal the hidden dynamics of personality, power, and influence. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to understand the quiet authority of these extraordinary individuals, and comment below with your thoughts or experiences. The Sigma male doesn't announce his power, but now you've seen it in full. Let this knowledge sharpen your awareness, challenge your assumptions, and elevate your understanding of the unseen forces that shape every room, every conversation, and every dynamic you encounter.